My son had no idea my salary had just jumped to $75,000 a month. He yelled, "Get out, you broke loser," and threw hot coffee on me. I walked away without a word. But the next day, his face went pale when I rolled up in a brand new luxury sports car, and I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, especially at 68. Most of my friends are out there enjoying their golden years, playing with grandkids, just living their best lives. Me? I was huddled in the guest room of my eldest son's house, jumping at every little sound on the stairs. It felt like I was living someone else's nightmare. My name is Gwendolyn Taft, and I spent my entire working life as an accountant for Pierce Construction in San Antonio. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, and stability became everything after my husband, Lester, died suddenly. 1 minute he was watching TV, complaining of heartburn, and 20 minutes later, he was gone. Just like that. I was left with 3 kids, ages 8, 12, and 14, and a mortgage. Raymond Pierce, my boss, was my salvation. He was incredibly understanding, letting me work from home when the kids were sick, always there when unexpected expenses popped up. I worked for him for 34 years, right up until I retired 3 years ago. My kids, they all turned out so different. Sybil, my middle child, is the most sensitive. She became an elementary school teacher, married a programmer named Dominic, and has 2 wonderful kids, Oliver and June. They live in Portland, and she calls me all the time, always sending the sweetest homemade cards from the grandkids at Christmas. Then there's Frank, my youngest. He inherited his dad's love for electronics, became an engineer, and moved to Chicago. He doesn't call as often as Sybil, but every single month, without fail, a small amount of money lands in my account, even though I've told him countless times I can manage. He recently divorced his wife, Paula, and sounds a bit lost on the phone, but he's getting there. And then there's Harlan, my eldest. He was always a difficult child, impulsive, stubborn, prone to little lies. Lester was better at handling his temper, but after Lester died, I just didn't always have the strength or the patience. Maybe I messed up with him. Or maybe that's just who he is. Harlan works as an insurance appraiser and married Daisy when he was 26. She's got these grand ideas about high society, even though she's just an administrator at a fitness club. They have 2 kids, Elliot, who's 15, and Nora, 13. My decision to move in with them wasn't something I planned. After I retired, I stayed in my little house, the one I'd finally paid off a year before I stopped working. My pension was modest, enough for basics, and I'd pick up some accounting consulting gigs for small businesses to make ends meet. But then, last fall, a flood hit. The basement and first floor were ruined, and the insurance barely covered half the repairs. I blew through almost all my savings, and what was left was barely enough for utilities. I was actually trying to figure out how much I could get for my grandmother's silver when Harlan called. "Mom, how would you feel about moving in with us?" he asked, and there was this uncharacteristic concern in his voice. "The kids miss you and Daisy, and I would feel better if you were around. We could even rent out your house for some extra income." I didn't jump at the offer. My relationship with Harlan had always been strained, and Daisy and I barely exchanged 2 words at family gatherings. But Harlan kept pushing, and eventually I gave in. I sold most of my furniture, rented my house out for just enough to cover taxes and insurance, and moved into their place on the outskirts of San Antonio with just 2 suitcases. The first few days were surprisingly good. Daisy was unusually sweet, showed me to the guest room on the first floor, gave me my own bathroom and a spot in the fridge. My grandkids, who I usually only saw once a year, were wary but polite. "We're so glad you're here, Mom," Harlan said, putting his arm around me. "Don't worry about a thing. Just live and enjoy yourself." But that feeling didn't last. On the evening of the 3rd day, we were all in the backyard. Daisy was barbecuing, the kids were playing badminton, and Harlan and I were sipping lemonade. "By the way, Mom," Harlan said, almost too casually, "Daisy and I work a lot, and the kids are teenagers now. They need supervision. Would you mind picking them up from school and making dinner sometimes? Just a couple of times a week, when Daisy and I have late shifts." Of course, I agreed. I was living there for free, helping with the grandkids was the least I could do. But a couple of times a week quickly became an everyday thing. Daisy started staying late at work, then signed up for manicure and pedicure classes, saying she needed to develop professionally. Then came the yoga classes for mental balance. By the end of the first month, I was cooking breakfast, lunch, and dinner, doing laundry, ironing, cleaning the house, picking up the kids, helping with homework, and driving them to their activities. And through it all, my opinion never mattered. Any initiative on my part was met with irritation. One day, I made a casserole, my mother's recipe. "What is this disgusting stuff?" Daisy grimaced, barely even looking at it. "You know I don't eat gluten." "But there's no gluten in it," I stammered, "just vegetables, a little cheese, and—" "I said I don't eat it," she snapped, turning to the kids. "Shall we order pizza?" They nodded happily, and Harlan didn't even look up from his phone. Another time, I bought Elliot a new shirt for a school holiday. All his shirts looked worn out. What are you doing? Harlan snapped when Elliot showed it off. Are you trying to show that we can't provide for our own son? Give that rag back and stay out of our business. I just wanted to help, I tried to explain. And it's not cheap junk. It's a good quality shirt from. Who cares? Harlan threw the shirt on the floor. We don't need your charity. After that, he didn't speak to me for a week, and Daisy took every chance to make snide remarks about certain pensioners who stick their noses in other people's business. The worst part was, my grandchildren quickly picked up on their parents' attitude. At first, they at least said hello, but soon they acted like I didn't exist. Elliot, when he thought I couldn't hear him, called me an old hag. And Nora would wrinkle her nose and say I smelled old. I tried to talk to Harlan, but he just brushed me off. Stop being so dramatic, Mom. You live in our house for free, so be thankful. My only escape was the occasional phone call from Sybil and Frank. Sybil always started by asking how I was feeling, listening carefully to my cautious answers. I never complained. I didn't want to cause trouble between the siblings. But I think she sensed something was wrong. Mom, you don't have to live with Harlan, she'd say. Dominic and I would love to have you move in with us. I'd joke, Portland's too damp for my joints, dear. Besides, you have enough on your plate with the children. Frank was less perceptive, but in every conversation, he'd offer money. Mom, I can send you more. Just tell me how much you need. I have everything I need, son, I'd reply. You'd better buy yourself something nice. Compared to these warm conversations, life at Harlan's house felt even more depressing. I was like an unwelcome guest, tolerated only for the benefits I provided. Daisy openly discussed with her friends on the phone how lucky she was to have a free housekeeper and babysitter. And Harlan, if I dared ask for the slightest help, like a ride to the clinic, would sigh and roll his eyes. Don't I have anything else to do? Call a taxi. By the end of the 3rd month, I was seriously thinking about moving back into my own home, even if it meant going into debt to break the lease. But then, a phone call came that changed everything. It was Tuesday around 5 p.m. Daisy wasn't home yet, the kids were at practice, and Harlan wouldn't be back until 8 o'clock. I was cooking dinner when my old phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and I was about to hang up. Scammers called me all the time, but something made me answer. Gwendolyn, this is Raymond Pierce. I don't know if you remember your old boss. Raymond's voice sounded weaker than I remembered, but it was definitely him, with that characteristic hoarseness and slight Texas accent. Of course I do, Mr. Pierce, I replied, surprised. How are you? Been better, Gwendolyn. Been better. He sighed heavily. Listen, we need to talk. It's important, and not something we can discuss over the phone. Can you come into the office tomorrow at 10 o'clock? I hesitated. Tomorrow was Wednesday. I had to pick up Nora from school at 2 o'clock and take her to piano lessons. This is really important, Gwendolyn. Raymond's voice was almost pleading. I wouldn't bother you if there was anyone else I could ask. All right, Mr. Pierce, I decided. I'll be at your office at 10 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you, Gwendolyn. And be prepared for a serious conversation. He hung up, leaving me completely bewildered. We hadn't spoken since I retired. What could possibly have happened that he needed me? And why did his voice sound so doomed? The next morning was cool, even for late April. I woke up at 5 o'clock, long before anyone else, to make breakfast and get ready. Thoughts of the conversation had kept me awake most of the night. The Pierce construction office was in the same building where I'd worked my whole life, but so much had changed. Glass partitions, trendy coffee machines, young employees glued to their tablets. The reception desk was now manned by a girl with bright red hair and piercings, the complete opposite of the stern Mrs. Becker from my day. I have an appointment with Mr. Pierce, I said, approaching the desk. Gwendolyn Taft. The girl looked up, gave me a once-over. Mr. Pierce is waiting for you. She nodded, not hiding her surprise. 4th floor, down the hall, last door. As I rode up in the elevator, I nervously tugged at my old tweed jacket. I'd bought it when I worked here, but it still looked decent. I always took good care of my clothes. Raymond's office had changed too, more spacious, modern furniture, huge windows overlooking the San Antonio business district. But Raymond himself, sitting at his massive desk, looked so much worse. He'd lost a lot of weight, his hair was completely gray, and there were deep shadows under his eyes. When he stood to greet me, I noticed he was limping slightly. Gwendolyn, he exclaimed, with a warmth I hadn't expected. How wonderful to see you. Please have a seat. He pointed to the chair across from his desk, then walked around to sit next to me, abandoning the formal distance of a boss. You haven't changed a bit, he smiled. But you. I started, then stopped, not wanting to be tactless. I look terrible, I know. Raymond waved his hand. Pancreatic cancer, late stage. The doctors give me 3 to 6 months. I gasped, pressing my hand to my lips. Raymond had always been the picture of vitality to me, energetic, active, tireless. Seeing him so weakened was painful. I'm so sorry, I murmured. Don't be, he smiled weakly. I've had a good life, Gwendolyn. I built a successful business, raised a daughter, even got to play with my grandchildren. But that's not the point. He paused, as if gathering strength. I invited you here because the company is in danger. After I was diagnosed, I started preparing to sell the business. I want the employees to be protected and the family to get a good deal. But my CFO, Vernon Gray, do you remember him? I nodded. Vernon had joined a couple of years before I retired. A slick young Wall Street guy Raymond had hired to modernize the finance department. He's cooking the books, Raymond continued, lowering his voice. He's hiding assets, underreporting profits, creating fictitious debts. He's laying the groundwork to buy the company for a song after I die. I have proof, but I need someone who understands all the schemes and can help fix the situation before the sale. And you thought of me? I asked, surprised. But I've been retired for 3 years. Everything has changed. New programs. Raymond covered my hand with his, dry and hot. You're the best accountant I've ever worked with. You have a sharp mind and tremendous integrity. I trust you more than anyone else in this company. But listen, he squeezed my hand tighter. I'm offering you the position of Chief Financial Officer with full access to all documents and signing authority and a salary of $75,000 a month. I gasped. The amount he named was astronomical, tens of times more than I'd ever earned. That's impossible, I breathed. You could hire anyone on Wall Street for that kind of money. That's where Vernon came from, Raymond said with a bitter smile. No, I need someone I can trust, someone who knows the company from the inside and won't sell it out for their own gain. He handed me a folder of documents. Here's a 6-month contract. That should be enough time to get everything in order and prepare the company for an honest sale. Take a look. Think about it, but don't drag your feet. Time is against us. I took the folder with trembling hands. The offer seemed unreal, like I'd fallen into a movie. $75,000 a month. Even for 6 months, that was more than I'd earned in the last 10 years of my career. What about Vernon? I asked. He'll just give up his position? I fired him this morning. Raymond allowed himself a faint smile. Security is already packing his things. He'll threaten to sue, of course, but I have enough evidence of his shenanigans that he'll prefer to leave quietly. I need to think about it, I said, still not believing what was happening. Of course, Raymond nodded. But I hope you'll agree. You're the only one who can save what I've built my whole life. I returned home in a state of complete confusion. The folder with the contract felt like it was burning my hands, and 1,000 thoughts swirled in my head. On one hand, this was a chance not only to gain financial independence, but also to help a man who had always been good to me. On the other hand, I wasn't sure that at my age, I could handle such responsibility. I stopped in front of Harlan's house, catching my breath. I had to come up with an explanation for my absence. Nora had probably already come home from school and complained that her grandmother hadn't picked her up. I was right. The moment I stepped inside, Daisy confronted me, furious. Where have you been? She snapped. Nora had to take the bus. She missed her piano lesson. I had to go to the clinic, I lied, deciding not to mention Raymond's offer. A spot suddenly opened up with a cardiologist, and I'd been waiting 2 months for this appointment. And you couldn't have warned me? Daisy crossed her arms. I missed an important meeting with a client because of you. I had to ask for time off to pick up Nora. I tried to call you, but my phone died. I continued to make up. I'm sorry, Daisy. It won't happen again. Like hell it won't, she snorted. Harlan is going to be furious. And indeed, that evening, I had to listen to a long, angry tirade from my son about my irresponsibility and ingratitude. We took you in, gave you a roof over your head, and what do? He shouted, spittle flying. You let us down at the first opportunity. Harlan, I explained, I don't care about your explanations. He slammed his fist on the table. Either you do your job or pack your things and go back to your hole. I lowered my head silently. Arguing with Harlan was useless, especially when he was in that mood. Besides, my mind was preoccupied with something else entirely, the contract still in my bag. At night, when the house was quiet, I took out the documents and studied them carefully by the light of a small desk lamp. The terms were more than generous. In addition to a fabulous salary, Raymond offered premium health insurance, a company car, and a bonus upon the successful sale of the company. The contract was well written, with no hidden clauses, and even provided for compensation in the event of early termination at the employer's initiative. I spent a sleepless night weighing the pros and cons. By morning, the decision was made. I would accept Raymond's offer. It wasn't just a chance to help someone who had always supported me, but an opportunity to regain control of my own life. I called him first thing in the morning, as soon as Harlan and Daisy left for work and the kids went to school. I accept, I said without preamble. Great, Raymond's voice sounded relieved. When can you start? Tomorrow. I'll see you at the office at 9 o'clock in the morning, Gwendolyn. Thank you. After hanging up, I thought about how to organize my new life. The first thing I had to decide was whether to tell my family about the new job. After yesterday's scandal, I was inclined to keep it a secret, at least for now. Knowing Harlan and Daisy, I could guess they would immediately start demanding money for repairs, a new car, or private school for the kids. No, I'd better get on my feet first, save up enough to rent my own place, and then decide what to do next. As a cover story, I made up that I'd signed up as a volunteer at the local library, where they needed people to sort books and help visitors. That would explain my absence on weekdays and sound plausible enough for someone of my age and position. In the evening, I cautiously mentioned my volunteering over dinner, trying to look as casual as possible. The library? Harlan asked, his mouth full. Why do you do that? So I don't sit at home all day, I shrugged. I need something to do, to be around people. Who's going to pick up the kids from school? Daisy immediately chimed in. And cook dinner? I've arranged to work part-time, I lied. I'll be done by 2 o'clock, so I'll have time to pick up the kids and make dinner. Harlan and Daisy exchanged glances, clearly dissatisfied, but they couldn't argue directly. After all, the job was unpaid, so they couldn't accuse me of having ulterior motives. Just don't let it interfere with your duties here, Harlan warned. We didn't take you in so you could entertain yourself with books. Of course, dear, I replied meekly, suppressing the urge to tell him the truth about how much I would now be earning. The next day, I started working at Pierce Construction. The first few weeks were incredibly difficult. I had to quickly learn new computer programs, figure out Vernon's complicated diagrams, and at the same time build relationships with my coworkers, many of whom looked at me with poorly concealed skepticism. But gradually, things started to fall into place. My many years of experience at the company proved invaluable. I knew all the ins and outs of the business, remembered the history of many projects, and quickly re-established old connections with clients and partners. In addition, accounting had always been my strong suit, and Vernon's schemes, though clever, were still easy to unravel. Raymond, despite his declining health, came into the office every other day and spent long hours with me, bringing me up to speed and supporting my decisions before the board of directors. You're doing even better than I expected, he said to me after a particularly successful meeting where we presented a debt restructuring plan. I knew I was right about you, Gwendolyn. His words meant more to me than all the money in the world. For the first time in a long time, I felt needed, competent, respected. It was an intoxicating feeling, especially in contrast to how I was treated at home. At home, the situation was only getting worse. Daisy, unhappy that I now had to divide my time between volunteering and household chores, became even more nitpicky and sarcastic. You've oversalted the soup again, she grimaced at dinner. And the laundry isn't ironed properly. Maybe you should spend less time on your books and more time taking care of the family that took you in. Harlan supported his wife in everything, adding his own complaints. Mom, you've been kind of distracted lately. Yesterday, you forgot to buy my favorite cheese. Today, you didn't write down a message from my boss. It's all because of your stupid library. Maybe you should stop playing charity. But the worst were the grandchildren. Now that Elliot and Nora realized their parents weren't going to reprimand them, they stopped even pretending to be polite. Once I caught Nora rummaging through my bag. What are you doing? I asked, trying to hide my alarm. There was a pay slip in the bag. Looking for money, she replied cheekily. I need a new phone case. Nora, you can't take other people's things without asking, I said, carefully taking the bag from her. If you need money, ask your parents. What could I possibly take from you? The girl snorted. You have nothing. You're a bum. I froze at such blunt rudeness. But before I could respond, Daisy entered the room. What's going on here? She asked, looking from her daughter to me. Grandma won't give me money for a cover, Nora complained immediately. And she hides her stupid bag from us. She was rummaging through my things, I tried to explain. What secrets could you possibly have? Daisy interrupted. You live in our house. You eat our food. If my daughter asks you for something, you have to help her. But no buts. Daisy cut me off. Give her the money for the cover since she's asking. I don't think you have anything more important to spend it on. I silently took out my wallet and handed Nora $20, the amount I'd been saving for new tights. The girl snatched the bill with a triumphant grin and ran out of the room. And remember, Daisy poked me with her finger. No secrets in my house. Got it. After she left, I sat down on the bed, trying to stop my hands from shaking. I needed to find a more secure place to hide my work documents. The next time, Elliot accidentally spilled orange juice on my favorite blouse, which I had just taken to the dry cleaner in preparation for an important meeting with investors. Oh, I'm sorry, he said with feigned remorse. I didn't notice. It's okay, I sighed, knowing it wasn't an accident. The boy looked too pleased with himself. Come on, Mom. Harlan interjected as I began to wash the stain. It's just an old rag. You can buy yourself a new one someday. They laughed, father and son, exchanging knowing glances. I said nothing, but inside I felt a knot of hurt and anger. That night, lying in bed, I allowed myself to really think about how my life would change with my new salary. I could rent a beautiful apartment, buy a car, travel. I could help Sybil and Frank spoil their children. I could cut off all contact with Harlan and his family if I wanted to. It was an intoxicating, dizzying freedom, and I fell asleep with a smile on my face, imagining Harlan's face when he found out the truth. But in the morning, common sense prevailed. I had to proceed cautiously. First, I needed to save up enough money, find a place to live, and perhaps consult a lawyer about my will. I didn't want Harlan to get a penny of my money after I died. In the meantime, I had to endure daily humiliation and pretend that everything was fine. Every morning, I went to the library, worked myself to exhaustion in the office, and then returned home to cook, clean, and listen to complaints and ridicule. Sometimes it felt like I was living a double life, a successful financial director by day and a powerless servant by night. It was exhausting, but the thought that things would soon change gave me strength. Hang in there, Gwendolyn, Raymond encouraged me, noticing the circles under my eyes. You're doing an incredible job. Just a little more, and we'll get the company out of this crisis. I smiled gratefully, not telling him about my domestic problems. He had enough worries of his own. Raymond's health was deteriorating every day, and at times it seemed to me that he was holding on only by sheer force of will and the desire to see his business saved. And at home, new trials awaited me. Daisy suddenly decided that I should also take on the cleaning of the garage and the backyard. You sit in your library all day, she said. Consider it compensation for your absence. But I already do all the housework, I tried to argue, and the library is work, too, even if it's unpaid. Who needs your fussing with books? Daisy snapped. You live here for free, so be nice and work for it. I gritted my teeth and said nothing. The workdays began to blend into one endless marathon. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, made breakfast for the whole family, packed the kids' lunches for school, and then slipped out of the house quietly while everyone was still asleep. On my way to the office, I stopped at a cafe and bought myself a coffee, a small luxury I could now afford. By 8:30, I was already sitting at my desk, sorting through financial reports and preparing for the next meeting. The work turned out to be more difficult than I had expected. Vernon had left behind a real mess of fake documents, hidden accounts, and confusing transactions. But I methodically, step by step, untangled the knot. Gwendolyn, you're a miracle, Raymond said as he looked over my reports. You've done more in 3 weeks than Vernon did in 3 years. I just know the company, I shrugged, but inside I was beaming with praise. By early June, we had uncovered and corrected most of Vernon's schemes, restored normal relations with key suppliers, and recovered some of the assets he had tried to siphon off through shell companies. There was still a lot of work ahead, but the hardest part was behind us. With my first paycheck, I allowed myself a few small pleasures. I bought a new phone to replace my ancient push-button model, ordered some nice cosmetics, and went to a salon where I got a modern haircut and color to cover my gray. I put the rest of the money in a separate account to save up for my own place. These small changes did not escape Daisy's watchful eye. Did you get your hair done? She asked one evening, squinting. And is that a new phone? Yes, I said, trying to sound casual. There was a volunteer event at the library, free haircuts from hairdressing college students. And Sybil gave me the phone for my birthday. Your birthday is in November, Daisy remarked dryly. It's a belated gift, I quickly replied. She was saving up for it. Daisy clearly didn't believe me, but she didn't pursue the subject. She was more interested in whether I had made the lasagna she had asked for dinner. I felt completely different at the office. There, I was a respected professional whose opinion was valued and whose decisions carried weight. Young employees who were initially skeptical of the old lady from the last century now came to me for advice and guidance. Even the members of the board of directors who were initially opposed to my appointment began to recognize my competence. Mrs. Taft, you've done an amazing job restructuring the debt with Gardner Investments. Alistair Montgomery, the most conservative and nitpicky of the directors, told me one day. I think we all underestimated you. I nodded, accepting the compliment, and smiled inwardly, imagining how Harlan would react if he heard his mother being spoken of with such respect. At home, the situation was becoming increasingly tense. Harlan and Daisy seemed determined to squeeze every last drop out of me. Now, my duties included not only cleaning the house, cooking, and looking after the children, but also laundry, ironing, gardening, walking the dog, and helping Elliot with his math homework. Mom, you're an accountant, Harlan would say, ignoring my protest that I was tired after a long day at the library. Explain these fractions to him. I don't have time. And I do. I finally snapped. Harlan stared at me as if I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. Of course, you have time, he said slowly. What else do you do? Your volunteer work is just a hobby that we graciously allow you to do. I'm a person, too, I said quietly. I have my own things to do and needs to fulfill. What other needs? He snorted. You have a roof over your head and food to eat. What more do you want? Instead of complaining, you should be grateful that we took you in. There was such sincere conviction in his voice that I realized it was useless to argue. He truly believed that he was doing me a huge favor by letting me live in his house and serve his family. I said nothing, swallowing my resentment, and went to help Elliot with his math. The boy greeted me with undisguised contempt. Don't think I'm going to listen to some old woman. Just do my homework for me. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that things would soon change. Just a little longer, and I would be able to leave here with my head held high. Raymond noticed my state, and once after a meeting, he kept me in his office. Is something wrong, Gwendolyn? He asked with genuine concern. You look exhausted. I wanted to brush it off, to say that everything was fine. But suddenly, I felt that I couldn't keep it all inside anymore. And I told him about my life with Harlan and his family, about the constant humiliation, about how hard it was to lead a double life. Raymond listened attentively without interrupting. And when I finished, he shook his head. Gwendolyn, why do you put up with this? You now have the means to live on your own. I'm saving up for a place, I explained. I want to have a nest egg before I take the plunge. That's wise, he nodded. But don't forget that life is too short to waste on those who don't appreciate you. His words struck a chord with me, especially considering his own situation. Raymond was fading away before our eyes. Every day could be his last, but he kept coming to the office, solving problems, making plans for the future of a company he would never see. You're right to want to be financially independent, he continued. But don't let them break your spirit. You're a wonderful woman, Gwendolyn, and you deserve respect. After that conversation, something changed in me. I still did my chores at home, but I no longer tried to please Harlan and Daisy in everything. If they asked for something clearly excessive, I calmly refused. If the children were rude, I didn't swallow my resentment, but firmly pointed out that such behavior was unacceptable. Of course, this did not go unnoticed. Daisy complained to Harlan that I had completely let myself go, and he in turn reprimanded me, to which I responded politely, but without my former submissiveness. What's going on with you, Mom? He asked once when I refused to sew all his shirts in one evening. You've become different. I'm just a human being, Harlan, I replied. And I have my limits. Are we asking too much of you? He asked, looking offended, after everything we've done for you? What exactly have you done for me? I asked quietly. What do you mean, what have we done for you? He looked genuinely surprised. We gave you a roof over your head, food, a family. Without us, you'd be living alone in your ramshackle shack with no one to care about you. In his eyes, I saw absolute conviction that he was right. For Harlan, this wasn't manipulation, but a statement of fact. He truly believed that he was doing me a great favor by allowing me to live in his house and serve his family. For the first time, I realized how deep the chasm between us was. My own son didn't see me as a person, but as a function, a tool for his convenience, and no words I could say would change that perception. From that moment on, I began counting the days until I could leave. Every morning as I left for work, I would mentally note another day gone. Every evening when I returned to Harlan's house, I would tell myself, this is temporary. My inner alienation must have been noticeable to those around me because the attitude toward me at home grew worse. Daisy stopped even pretending to be polite. Elliot and Nora openly ignored my requests and instructions, and Harlan increasingly spoke to me in an irritated tone, as if I were a disobedient child. In mid-July, when my bank account had enough money for the first month's rent, something happened that finally decided everything. It was Saturday, a day off. For the first time in a long time, I had the whole day free. The office had declared a cleaning day, and I told my family that I was doing inventory at the library. I planned to spend the day looking at apartment listings and maybe go see a couple of options, but Harlan and Daisy had other plans. Mom, Daisy and I want to go see this new movie, my son announced at breakfast. Will you watch the kids? I have some things planned for today, I replied cautiously. What things? Daisy didn't even look up from her phone. You have the day off. You could spend it doing something useful, spending time with your grandchildren. I have a doctor's appointment, I lied, knowing they wouldn't believe me anyway. The orthopedist for my arthritis. I've been waiting 2 months for this appointment. Reschedule it, Harlan shrugged. It's not that urgent. I can't reschedule, I tried to say firmly but calmly. The doctor is very busy. And the next appointment won't be until September. So what? Daisy interjected. You can wait until September. You won't fall apart. We want to go to the movies. My knees hurt already. I decided to stand my ground. I need to see the doctor. God, Mom. Harlan rolled his eyes. Always your health problems. Why can't you just help your family when they ask you to? I help you every day. My patience was wearing thin. I cook, clean, pick up the kids from school, help with homework. Can I have one day to myself? To yourself? Harlan asked, sounding as surprised as if I had said something absurd. What would you do to yourself? You're retired. You don't have a job, hobbies, or friends. Your life is us, your family. I have my own life, I said quietly, but firmly. And my own needs. What needs does an old woman have? Daisy snorted, not looking up from her phone. The main need at your age is to be useful to your family, not a burden. I looked at her, then at Harlan, who was nodding in agreement with his wife's every word, and realized that the conversation was pointless. They really didn't see me as a person with my own desires and rights. I'm sorry, but I can't babysit tonight, I said, getting up from the table. I have to go to the doctor. Didn't you hear what we said? Harlan raised his voice. You're not going anywhere. You're staying with the kids. No, I said firmly for the first time. I'm not staying. Harlan's face turned red with anger. He jumped up from his chair and loomed over me. What do you mean no? You live in my house. You eat my food, and you'll do what I tell you. I'm your mother, not your servant. I tried to speak calmly, though I was trembling inside. And I have a right to my own time. What right? Harlan roared. You live here out of the goodness of our hearts. Out of the goodness of our hearts, do you understand? If it weren't for us, you'd be living in your hole, counting pennies until you retired. His words hurt more than I expected. Not because they were true, I knew I could now afford a much better life than Harlan's, but because they reflected his attitude toward me, contempt, superiority, complete lack of respect. I'm leaving, I said, feeling strangely calm. I'm going to see the doctor now, and we'll talk tonight when you've calmed down. I turned to leave the kitchen, but Harlan grabbed my arm, squeezing my wrist painfully. You're not going anywhere. I told you, you're staying with the kids. Let go. I tried to free myself. You're hurting me. Hurting you. He laughed maliciously. You don't know what hurting is yet, you ungrateful old hag. We took you in, gave you a home, and instead of gratitude, you throw a scene. Daisy still stared at her phone as if nothing unusual was happening. Let me go, Harlan, I repeated right now. Or what? He squeezed my hand even tighter. What are you going to do, you beggar? Where will you go without us? Who needs you? Something broke inside me at that moment. Years of hurt, humiliation, and rejection poured out. I pulled my hand away and, to my own surprise, shouted, I need myself. I'm a human being, not a thing. I'm your mother who raised you alone after your father died, who worked 2 jobs so you could go to college, and this is how you thank me. By treating me like a servant? By humiliating me in front of my own grandchildren. My screams seemed to stun everyone. Daisy even looked up from her phone, and the children froze with their mouths open. But Harlan quickly regained his composure. How dare you raise your voice to me in my own house, he hissed, grabbing his mug of hot tea from the table. You. He didn't finish his sentence. Instead, he threw the hot tea in my face. The scalding liquid ran down my cheeks, neck, and chest, soaking my blouse. I screamed in pain and surprise. Get out, you beggar! Harlan yelled, pushing me toward the door. Get out of my house. You're no longer part of this family. You're nobody. Do you hear me? Nobody. Shocked my face and clothes wet with tea, I backed toward the door. Harlan's eyes burned with a fury I had never seen before. Behind him stood Daisy and the children, unperturbed, indifferent, as if what was happening was a normal family argument and not the expulsion of an elderly woman from her home. Pack your things and get out. Harlan continued to shout. I'll give you 10 minutes, then I'll throw everything out onto the street. I turned silently and went to my room. My hands were shaking. My face was burning from the tea and humiliation. But inside, I felt a strange emptiness. It was as if something important that connected me to this house, to these people, had finally been severed. I quickly gathered the essentials into a small bag, my documents, my phone, a few changes of clothes. I could pick up the rest later or buy new things. Right now, the main thing was to get out of this house where I had been humiliated for so long. Passing by the kitchen, I heard Daisy say, maybe you shouldn't have been so harsh. She is your mother, after all. I don't care, Harlan snapped. She crossed the line. Let her get out and live her own life. We'll see how she manages without us. I quietly opened the front door and stepped outside. It was a sunny morning. Neighbors were busy in their gardens. Someone was walking their dog. A typical summer day in the suburbs of San Antonio. I walked slowly down the sidewalk without looking back. My face was still burning from the tea. My blouse clung uncomfortably to my body, but strangely, I felt lighter than I had in months. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Where to now? I thought, stopping at the corner. I had a decent amount of money in my account, but no place to stay. I could have called Sybil or Frank, but I didn't want to get them involved in my conflict with Harlan. I took out my phone and called a taxi to the nearest hotel. After all, I could afford it now. And then there would be a new life, one with no place for those who didn't know how to appreciate and respect others. Sitting on a bench waiting for the taxi, I suddenly caught myself smiling. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. The Riverview Hotel turned out to be a real lifesaver. The spacious room with air conditioning, a soft bed, and a large bathroom seemed almost like a palace to me after the cramped guest bedroom at Harlan's house. The first thing I did was take a long, hot shower, washing away not only the sticky traces of tea, but also all the negativity of my past life. Red burn marks remained on my skin, but fortunately, they weren't too serious. The hotel manager, noticing my condition, offered to bring a first aid kit. And now I carefully applied healing ointment to the affected areas. When I was done, I sat down on the edge of the bed and allowed myself to fully comprehend what had happened for the first time that day. My own son had kicked me out of my home. He had poured hot tea on me, called me a beggar, and thrown me out onto the street like a piece of trash. And he had done all this in front of his wife and children, who did nothing to stop him. Strangely, instead of the despair I expected, I felt only emptiness and a slight bitterness. It was as if the last thread connecting me to Harlan had finally snapped, freeing me from any illusions or hopes that our relationship would ever work out. I took out my phone and, after a moment's hesitation, dialed Raymond's number. Despite it being his day off, he answered almost immediately. "Gwendolyn, is something wrong?" His voice sounded concerned, and it touched me unexpectedly. Holding back tears, I briefly told him what had happened. "My God," Raymond exhaled when I finished. "That's terrible. Are you okay? Do you need medical attention?" "No, just minor burns," I replied. "I'm at the Riverview Hotel. They have everything here." "Stay there," he said firmly. "I'll call my friend at the real estate agency. We'll find you a decent place to live, not just a temporary shelter." After talking to Raymond, I felt a little better. At least I had a job, money, and the prospect of a place to live. Not bad for a woman my age who had just been kicked out of her home by her son. My next call was to Sybil. I didn't want to disturb her on her day off, but I felt I had to tell at least one of my children what had happened before Harlan did in his version. "Mom," Sybil answered, surprised. "You rarely call on Saturdays." "I'm not living with Harlan anymore," I said, deciding not to beat around the bush. "What? Why? What happened?" I told her everything, trying to be objective and not exaggerate. Although some details, like the hot tea thrown in my face, still made her gasp in outrage. "Oh my God, Mom, that's awful," she exclaimed when I finished. "Do you want Dominic and me to come over, or you can fly out to Portland?" "No, honey," I replied gently. "I'll be fine. I have a job and money for housing." "A job?" Sybil asked. "You mean volunteering at the library? But does that pay?" And then I decided it was time to tell the truth. At least to Sybil, the most sensitive of my children. "Actually, I don't work at the library," I confessed. "I'm the chief financial officer at Pierce Construction. I make $75,000 a month." There was silence on the other end of the line. And then Sybil burst out laughing. "Mom, you're joking, right? $75,000 a month? That's insane." "It's true," I said calmly. "Raymond Pierce, my former boss, offered me the job 2 months ago. I kept it a secret from Harlan and his family because, well, you know why. We talked for almost an hour." Sybil bombarded me with questions about my job, my plans for the future, and offered to come and help again. I assured her I could manage on my own, but promised to keep her posted. After talking to my daughter, I called Frank. My younger son's reaction was more subdued. He had never been particularly emotional, but I could sense his genuine outrage at Harlan's behavior and his relief that I was okay. I was awakened in the morning by a call from Raymond. "Gwendolyn, my friend Marcus from the real estate agency has found something special for you. It's an apartment in River Heights, a new gated community with a pool and a spa. It's a 2-bedroom with a view of the river. If you're interested, he can show it to you today." I agreed to take a look, although I doubted that such an apartment would be within my budget. River Heights was considered one of the most prestigious residential complexes in San Antonio. Marcus, an energetic man in his 50s, met me at the entrance to the complex and showed me inside. The grounds were impressive, manicured lawns, fountains, winding paths among flowering shrubs. The apartment itself was simply stunning. A spacious living room with panoramic windows overlooking the river, a modern kitchen with all the necessary appliances, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and even a small study. Marcus named the price, and I was surprised. It was well within my means with my new salary. "The owner is going abroad to work for 3 years and wants to rent the apartment to a reliable tenant," explained the real estate agent. "I told him about you, the CFO of a reputable company, recommended by Raymond Pierce himself. He agrees to a long-term lease with a fixed rate and the right of first refusal if you decide to stay." The next day, I signed a lease for an apartment in River Heights, and by evening, I had moved my few belongings from the hotel. The empty rooms looked uncomfortable, but that was a temporary problem. Now, I had the means to furnish the place to my liking. On Monday, I returned to work with renewed energy. My colleagues noticed the change in my mood. I looked more energetic and focused, despite all the ups and downs of the weekend. Over the next 2 weeks, I immersed myself completely in setting up my new life. During the day, I worked at the office where Raymond and I were preparing the company for sale. And in the evenings, I worked on the apartment, buying furniture, dishes, and textiles, gradually turning the empty space into a real home. I allowed myself a little luxury. I ordered a designer sofa for the living room, a bed with an orthopedic mattress that I had long dreamed of, and a dining set made of natural wood. Each new item that appeared in the apartment seemed to reinforce my new identity as a successful, independent woman who could afford to live the way she wanted. One evening, when Raymond and I were staying late at the office discussing the strategy for upcoming negotiations with potential buyers, he suddenly asked, "How do you get to work, Gwendolyn?" "By taxi," I replied. "It's convenient from River Heights." "It's not far. Why don't you buy a car?" Raymond suggested. "Your contract includes a company car, but you haven't used it yet." I thought about it. Indeed, there was a clause in the contract about a company car, but with moving from Harlan's and settling into my new apartment, I simply hadn't had time to look into it. "I haven't driven in years," I admitted. "After Lester died, we only had one car, and Harlan took it when he left for college. After that, I just got used to taking public transportation." "But you know how to drive?" Raymond asked. "Of course, I just haven't practiced in a while." "Then it's settled." He smiled, his characteristic, determined smile. "Tomorrow, we're going to pick out a car for you, and not just any boring little runabout, but something befitting your new status." The next day, despite his failing health, Raymond personally drove me to the car dealership. Not just any car dealership, but a Jaguar dealership, one of the most prestigious in the city. "Raymond, this is too much," I protested when I realized where we had arrived. "I don't need such an expensive car." "Gwendolyn," he said seriously, turning to me. "I won't be around much longer. I want to do something good for people who deserve it. Let me do this." The sales manager, who recognized Raymond, greeted us with open arms and led us into the showroom where shiny cars stood, each worth more than I had earned in my entire life. "You need something elegant but with character," said the manager, looking me up and down. "Let me suggest the F-Type. It's our sports convertible. Amazing handling, acceleration from 0 to 60 in 4 seconds, and absolute comfort." He led us to a gleaming dark blue car with a cream-colored leather interior. The car looked like a work of art, sweeping lines, predatory headlights, and elegant curves. The manager arranged a test drive, and 20 minutes later, we were leaving the showroom in an F-Type with an instructor in the passenger seat. Raymond stayed in the showroom. He wasn't feeling well enough for such excitement. I felt uncertain during the first few minutes behind the wheel. Too many buttons, too sensitive pedals, too powerful an engine. But gradually, under the instructor's guidance, I began to get used to it. And when we pulled onto the highway, and I truly felt what this car was capable of for the first time, I was overcome with a wave of pure delight. "You're doing great," praised the instructor. "For someone who hasn't driven in a long time, you have excellent reflexes." Back in the showroom, I knew I couldn't give up this car. It seemed to embody my new life, bright, fast-paced, full of possibilities. 2 days later, I became the owner of a new Jaguar F-Type, a dark blue beauty that now stood proudly in my parking space at River Heights. The company paid for the car in full as part of my severance package, and even arranged for me to take intensive driving lessons with a professional instructor. It was like the world had been opened up to me. With my own apartment, a prestigious job, and a luxury car, I felt 10 years younger. I was literally bursting with energy. I took long walks along the waterfront, joined the pool at our complex, and even started taking yoga classes for seniors. My physical transformation continued as well. I updated my wardrobe, choosing elegant but modern clothes that flattered my figure rather than hiding it under shapeless robes as I had done before. A stylist at a fashion salon gave me a new haircut and taught me how to apply natural makeup that refreshed my face without making it look vulgar. "You've literally blossomed," Raymond remarked when I showed up at the office in a new lavender suit with my hair done. "You look like you've aged 15 years. "I feel like I have," I admitted. "It's like I've started my life over again." And it was true. For the first time in many years, I felt like I wasn't just a function, a mother, a grandmother, a housekeeper, but a complete person with my own desires, ambitions, and the right to happiness. I talked regularly with Sybil and Frank, who were delighted to see the changes in me. Sybil even flew in for the weekend to see my new apartment and, of course, my car. "My goodness, Mom, you look amazing," she exclaimed, hugging me at the airport. "And that's your car? Seriously?" We had a wonderful weekend walking around the city, dining at nice restaurants, talking about everything under the sun. Sybil admitted that she had never seen me so happy and energetic. "You know, I always worried about you," she said as we sat on the balcony of my apartment, sipping wine and watching the sun set over the river. "I was afraid you'd end up living alone in your old house, counting every penny. And then when you moved in with Harlan, I felt something was wrong, but I didn't know how bad it was." "I didn't realize how bad it was either," I admitted. "Not until I had a chance to see it from the outside." After she left, Frank came to visit me. He took 3 days off work and flew in from Chicago. When he saw my new life, he just shook his head respectfully. "Wow, Mom, you showed us all up. We had a wonderful time together. Unlike my sister, Frank was more practical and helped me with a few technical issues. He set up my computer, installed a security system in the apartment, and even hung shelves in the closet. You know, he said as we said goodbye at the airport, I always knew you were special, but you've exceeded all expectations. His words touched me deeply. For the first time in a long time, I felt that my children, at least two of them, saw me not just as a mother, but as a person with my own achievements and strengths. Work was also going well. Raymond and I completed the restructuring of the company and began negotiations with potential buyers. Raymond's condition was deteriorating. He now came to the office only once a week and spent most of his time working from home or in the hospital, but his mind remained sharp, and we continued to function as a well-oiled team. In early August, Raymond Pierce called me to his home. His condition had deteriorated significantly. He was no longer able to come to the office and spent most of his time in bed under the supervision of a nurse, but his mind remained clear and his interest in the company's affairs was unabated. Gwendolyn, he said as I settled into a chair by his bed with a folder of documents on my lap. Any news on potential buyers? Yes, and good news, I smiled. Bradford Industries has raised its offer to $120 million. Their lawyers are already drafting the contract. Excellent. Raymond smiled weakly. I hope I live to see the signing. Don't say that, I covered his hand with mine. You'll see your company pass into good hands. We discussed a few business matters. Then the conversation unexpectedly turned personal. How's your son? Raymond asked. You didn't tell me if you've had any contact with him since that incident. None, I shook my head. He called a few times, left messages, but I didn't call back. That's the right thing to do, Raymond nodded. But you know, my daughter told me something interesting. Her husband works at the insurance company where your Harlan used to work. It turns out he was fired for a serious mistake in the reports that caused the company a major client. I see. I felt a slight pang of regret, but nothing more. That's not all, Raymond continued. Rumor has it that he's in serious financial trouble. The bank is threatening to foreclose on his house for late payments. He and his wife are trying to sell it quickly, but the market isn't very favorable right now. I was silent, not knowing what to say. On the one hand, I felt sorry for Harlan. No matter how badly he had treated me, he was still my son. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was some kind of higher justice in this situation. I'm not telling you this to gloat, Raymond said gently, noticing my confusion. I just thought you should know. Maybe it's time to get your things out of his house before it's too late. Maybe you're right, I replied thoughtfully. There are photos, letters, and a few mementos I didn't have time to take with me that day. Then don't put it off, Raymond advised. And don't let him hurt you again. You deserve better. That evening, I called Sybil to find out what she knew about Harlan. She confirmed Raymond's words and added a few details. Daisy called me last week, Mom. They're really in a desperate situation. Harlan can't find a new job. He was fired in a scandal and didn't get any references. They're selling their house, their car, even their furniture. Daisy asked if I could lend them some money. And what did you say? That we're in a difficult situation ourselves right now, Sybil sighed. And it's true. Dominic is waiting for a promotion, but it's been put on hold because of restructuring at his company. And the children. You know how much education costs these days. I know, dear, I said gently. You did the right thing. Mom, Sybil's voice grew quieter. Don't you think you should help them? I know Harlan did a terrible thing, but he's still your son. I thought about it. Did I really want to help Harlan after everything he had done to me? After all the humiliation, after he had thrown me out of the house and poured hot tea on me? I don't know, I replied. Honestly, I need to think about it. But first, I want to get my things. I'll call him tomorrow and arrange a meeting. After talking to Sybil, I sat on the balcony of my apartment for a long time, looking at the lights of San Antonio at night and thinking about the vicissitudes of fate. For months ago, I was a powerless pensioner living in my son's house as a free servant. And now I was a successful financial director with a luxurious apartment and a sports car. And now Harlan, who had treated me so cruelly, found himself in a desperate situation. Was there some kind of higher justice at work here? Or was it just a coincidence? What should I do now? Help him, or let him reap the rewards of his actions? In the morning, I called Harlan. He answered almost immediately, and there was a strange excitement in his voice. Mom, is that you? Yes, Harlan, I tried to speak calmly. I'd like to pick up my things that are still at your place. When can I come over? Of course, he said with unusual helpfulness. You can come anytime. I will be home all day. Then I'll come tomorrow around 11 o'clock, I said. Okay, Mom. And I wanted to say, I'm really glad you called. We missed you. I almost laughed at the sudden change in tone. Not long ago, he had called me a beggar and kicked me out of the house. And now suddenly he missed me? Had Sybil told him about my new job, or was he so desperate that he was willing to humiliate himself in front of anyone just to get financial help? See you tomorrow, Harlan, I said, and hung up without responding to his sentimental outburst. The next morning, I dressed carefully, choosing an elegant ivory-sheath dress, low-heeled shoes, and minimalist gold jewelry. I did my makeup and styled my hair. Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. The well-groomed, confident woman was so different from the downtrodden old woman I had been just a few months ago. At exactly 10:30, I got into my Jaguar and headed for Harlan's house. The weather was beautiful. Bright August sunshine, a light breeze, perfect conditions for a drive with the top down. The car glided smoothly along the roads, attracting admiring glances from passers-by and other drivers. Who would have thought that at 68 years old, I would be driving a sports convertible and enjoying every minute of it? When I turned onto the street where Harlan lived, my heart involuntarily began to beat faster. I hadn't been here since the day my son kicked me out of the house. The neighborhood looked the same, neat houses behind low fences, trimmed lawns, children's bicycles on the driveways. But now I looked at it all as if from the outside, as a stranger, not as a resident. Harlan's house stood out from the neighboring houses, and not in a good way. The lawn was unkempt. There were oil stains on the driveway, and a squat for sale sign with a real estate agent's phone number stood on the lawn. I parked the Jaguar right in front of the house, turned off the engine, and froze for a moment, gathering my thoughts. What did I feel? Strangely enough, almost nothing. No anger, no resentment, no desire for revenge or gloating. Just a calm confidence that this stage of my life was over, and I had come to put an end to it. I got out of the car, straightened my shoulders, and headed for the front door. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open and Harlan appeared on the threshold. He had lost weight and looked haggard during the time we hadn't seen each other. His eyes were sunken with dark circles under them, and there was clearly more gray in his hair. "Mom," he exclaimed with exaggerated joy. "I'm so glad to see you." He took a step forward as if to hug me, but I took a small step back, and he stopped awkwardly, lowering his arms. "Hello, Harlan," I said calmly. "I've come for my things." "Yes, of course," he nodded, continuing to smile, although it looked forced. "Come in, please. Daisy has made tea and cookies." And I walked into the house, noting how much had changed in such a short time. Some of the furniture was gone. The pictures were off the walls, and what remained looked neglected and dreary. There was a strange smell in the air, a mixture of stale food, dust, and general desolation. Daisy was waiting for me in the living room, wearing what she apparently considered her best dress, a little outdated and not particularly flattering on her plump figure. Elliot and Nora sat nearby on the sofa, unusually quiet and clearly embarrassed. "Gwendolyn." Daisy stepped toward me with a fake smile. "How wonderful to see you. You look stunning." Her voice sounded genuinely surprised, and her gaze appraised my outfit, my hairstyle, my jewelry, everything that was so different from my former appearance. "Thank you, Daisy," I nodded. "You too. You look well." The last sentence was a blatant lie. Daisy looked exhausted and unkempt, with messy makeup and dull hair. "Please sit down," Harlan said, pointing to a chair. "Would you like some tea or coffee?" "No, thank you." I remained standing. "I don't have much time. I just wanted to pick up my things." "Yes, of course." Harlan rubbed his hands nervously. "I packed everything into boxes. They're in the garage. But maybe you'd like to stay for a while. We haven't seen each other in so long." "And whose fault is that?" I asked, not raising my voice, but firmly. Harlan blushed and lowered his eyes. "Mom, we're all very sorry about what happened. I wasn't myself. I said some terrible things. It's unforgivable, I know, but maybe we could start over." I looked closely at my son. His eyes showed despair, but not remorse. He looked like a drowning man clutching at straws, not a person who sincerely regretted his actions. "Harlan," I said calmly, "let's not pretend. You found out about my new job from Sybil or Frank and decided I could help you out with money. That's why you suddenly remembered your family ties." "What?" "No." He feigned indignation. "How could you think that? We all missed you. Right, kids?" Elliot and Nora nodded in unison, but their faces remained impassive. It was obvious that they had been forced to participate in the charade. "Mom, I heard you're working at your old company now," Harlan continued, clearly deciding to change tactics. "That's great. I always knew you were a great professional. And is that your car outside?" "Impressive." "Yes, that's my Jaguar." I allowed myself a slight smile. "A company car. Part of my compensation package as CFO, Chief Financial Officer." Daisy couldn't hide her surprise. "But you said you were a volunteer at the library." "I lied," I replied simply. "I didn't want you to know about my real job and salary." "Salary?" Harlan leaned forward. "And how much do you make if you don't mind me asking?" $75,000 a month, I said calmly, without boasting, simply stating a fact. The room fell silent. Harlan froze with his mouth open. Daisy turned pale, and the children showed their first sign of interest in the conversation, looking at each other in surprise. $75,000 a month, Harlan repeated slowly, as if he couldn't believe his ears. "But that's more than you made in a year at the insurance company," I finished for him. Yes, life is full of irony, isn't it? Mom, that's amazing. Harlan seemed to have finally found his voice. I'm so happy for you, and it's for the best that it turned out this way. You've gained independence, a new life, thanks to you kicking me out of the house and pouring hot tea on me. I raised an eyebrow. Well, that's not what I meant, he said, embarrassed. It's just, everything's for the best, right? Maybe I agreed. But don't pretend you wanted to help me. You wanted to get rid of the burden, as you called me. Mom, I was wrong. Harlan took a step toward me, his voice pleading. I admit it. I acted terribly, but we all make mistakes, right? Didn't you teach us to forgive? Yes, I nodded. And I forgive you, Harlan. But that doesn't mean I'll forget, or that I should put myself at risk of being treated that way again. But we've changed, Daisy interjected. The last few months have been difficult for us. We've reevaluated a lot of things. Yeah, especially when you found out I make $75,000 a month. I couldn't resist the sarcasm. Gwendolyn, we're truly sorry. Daisy moved closer, her voice honeyed. And we'd like you to be part of our family again. You mean you'd like my money to be part of your family? I corrected her. Let's be honest, at least now, Mom. Don't be like that. Harlan took another step toward me. Of course, things are tough for us financially right now, but it's not about the money. It's just that I've realized how much you mean to us. I sighed. His insincerity was almost palpable. Where are my things, Harlan? I asked, deciding not to continue this pointless conversation. In the garage, he said, visibly deflated. I'll walk you out. We walked through the kitchen to the garage where there were indeed 3 cardboard boxes with Mom written on the side. That's everything, Harlan said. I tried not to forget anything. Your photo albums, books, personal items. I opened the top box and glanced through the contents. Everything looked fine. My old photos, letters, a few mementos. Thanks, I nodded. Can you help me carry them to the car? Harlan picked up 2 boxes, and I took the third, the lightest one. We left the house and headed for my Jaguar. Daisy and the children followed us, clearly not wanting to miss the spectacle. Wow, Elliot breathed, speaking for the first time since I had arrived. Is that really your car, Grandma? Yes, Elliot, it's my car, I said, opening the trunk, which was large enough to hold all 3 boxes. Cool, the boy muttered with reluctant admiration. Harlan carefully placed the boxes in the trunk and turned to me. Mom, please, let's talk. I know I did a terrible thing, but I'm your son, your flesh and blood. Can you give me a second chance? I looked at him closely. Standing before me was a grown man, my own child, whom I had given birth to, raised, and sacrificed myself for over many years. But in his eyes, I saw only calculation and despair, not love or remorse. You know, Harlan, I said calmly when you kicked me out of the house, you called me a beggar and said I was nobody, that I was living in your house out of the goodness of your heart. You didn't see me as a person, just a function, a convenient servant who cooked, cleaned, and looked after the children. I was wrong, he said, lowering his eyes. I didn't mean it. No, you did, I shook my head. And you know what's the saddest part? I almost believed you. I almost believed that I was nobody, that I didn't deserve respect or a decent life. But now I know that's not true. I closed the trunk and walked around the car to get behind the wheel. Mom, please. Harlan followed me. We're on the verge of bankruptcy. The bank is taking the house. I don't have a job. The kids could end up on the street. I'm sorry you're in this situation, I said sincerely. But you're a grown man, Harlan. You'll manage. But you could help. His voice took on a familiar, demanding tone. You make a fortune, and your own son could end up homeless. Like you once said to me, I opened the car door. Let's see how you manage without us. Now it's your turn to find out the answer to that question. You can't do this. Harlan's voice became hysterical. I'm your son. Yes, you're my son, I said, getting behind the wheel. And that's exactly why I'm not just going to give you money. It won't help you become a better person. Maybe when you face the consequences of your actions, you'll finally learn to appreciate other people and treat them with respect. I started the engine, and the powerful roar of the motor made Harlan take a step back. Goodbye, Harlan, I said. I wish you and your family all the best. Mom, he made one last desperate attempt. You can't just leave. We're family. Family isn't just blood, I replied. It's mutual respect, care, and support. When you're ready for a real family relationship, you know where to find me. With that, I pulled away, leaving Harlan, Daisy, and the children standing on the driveway with confused and angry faces. As I pulled onto the highway, I felt a strange sense of relief. Not malice, not vengeful satisfaction, but relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in many years, I was completely free. Free from guilt, from false responsibility, from toxic relationships. That evening, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, sipping a glass of fine wine and looking out at the lights of San Antonio at night. The boxes of things from Harlan's house stood unpacked in the corner of the living room. I decided to sort through them tomorrow with a clear head. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Sybil. Mom, how did it go? Her voice sounded worried. Fine, I replied calmly. I got my things and left. And Harlan? Did he ask for help? Yes, I smiled. As soon as he found out about my salary, he remembered that I was his beloved mother. And what did you decide? Sybil asked cautiously. I refused, I replied simply. Not because I want to get back at him, but because it won't help him become a better person. He has to deal with the consequences of his actions himself. There was silence on the other end of the line. And then Sybil said quietly, Mom, I think you're right. Harlan has always been complicated. Maybe this is exactly what he needs. Maybe I agreed. Time will tell. After talking to my daughter, I returned to the balcony. The night was warm, with a light breeze carrying the scent of blossoming trees from the waterfront. Somewhere in the distance, music played, and I could hear the laughter of people living their lives with their joys and sorrows. I thought about how strange life was. 6 months ago, I was a dependent, downtrodden old woman whom my own son considered a burden. Now, I was a successful, financially independent woman with my own house, car, and most importantly, a sense of self-worth. Money has certainly changed my life for the better. It has given me freedom, comfort, and opportunities one never had before. But true wealth did not come with a bank account, but with the realization of my own worth, the ability to defend my boundaries, and the courage to live the way I believe is right.